Rolling.
Welcome old family and new family to BoomBappED, capital ED. I'm your co-host with the most, Brother Brandon White, aka Bushido Garvey.
What's happening, Rochester? Yo, this is Atlas coming at you on the mic and on the mix. What's up?
And we have Brother Rob Lowe on the tech. It's been some time, right? Because we had that 3-part installment with the Honorable Dr. Walter Cooper. But we have yet another amazing honor and yet another intimate new setting with the Storyteller, the Elder, the Wise Man, the Community Organizer,
Historian,
and my homie's father, Mr. Djed Snead.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, sir.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
For those who don't know, BoomBappED is an honest, open, and clear-headed exploration of education and cultural issues focused on, but not limited to, the Rochester area through a hip-hop lens.
True. I want to welcome y'all into my little creative space over here this week on BoomBappED.
Yes.
It's an honor to have Brother Djed Snead in the house. So what we like to do to kind of set things off is we give all of our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves in their own words, give a little overview, quick rundown of what you do or have done professionally, what makes you tick outside of that work. What do you want people to know right off the top?
That I'm a family man, that I come from a family of caring elders, that I come from a family of spiritual beings, and that they influenced me not only to care about my community, but to care about my children, to care about my aunts, my uncles, and to pay respect to each one of them, and to do my research. It's an amazing thing as I've gotten younger. And I've begun to realize just how important it is to be respectful, not only of those in the family, but those in the community. Looking back now at my dad's life, I can see now why he was given so much respect until his transition, is because he always cared about his church. He was a Mason, he cared about that community, but he cared about the Monroe and Wayne County communities. Well respected, as I was sharing earlier, a gospel singer in that whole community. He was just a community-oriented person, and my mom along with him. Yeah, it was about community.
Noted. All right.
So we also have an icebreaker question that are often like situational, and as a playwright, I'm sure you'll be able to appreciate the question I'm about to ask you. Here's your situation, and that gives us an insight to who you are. Pretend like it's 1980. You're in the nascent stages of hip-hop. You have to form a hip-hop crew. What would be the name of Djed Snead's hip-hop crew? And if you were the MC, what would you call yourself?
I'd call myself Djed Ma'at. Stability, creativity, and balance. Those are all the ancient Egyptian concepts. You said what would be the name of the crew?
Yes, sir.
I think we would call ourselves Djed Ma'at. We would call ourselves Djed Ma'at, because each one of us, if I was associated with them, I would want and hope and expect that they would be buying into that concept.
Kind of like Diana Ross and the Supremes, okay, right? There's a Djed Ma'at, right? Like, but your name is there.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the distinction, though. I would really think, I think Diana Ross and the Supremes came after the Supremes, if you know what I mean. First there was the Supremes. Then when the money and the idolatry and the ego got in, Diana Ross and the Supremes. But in the beginning, it was just the Supremes. And I would hope that Djed Ma'at, that inclusiveness, would last the whole time period. That's what I would hope.
Nice. See how much insight that provided us about who this guy is?
So, Brother Djed, you have achieved and you continue to produce prodigious amounts of material. creative material, and this is across a variety of mediums, right? So you're a published poet, playwright, you're an author, you're a historical reenactor, a storyteller, you are and have been a musician, and there's also a teaching element that's present in a lot of your creative endeavors. What drives your creative output and the angle that you take, and what do you find most gratifying about working in the different mediums that you employ?
I think what drives me most is having come under Dr. David Anderson Sankofa. I moved over to Rochester in '72 when I graduated from high school, and for a number of years I was active on the open mic poetry scene. But it really wasn't until I came under the tutelage and the influence of Dr. Anderson that I really got a focus. I saw in him, and still see in him, a person who is a mentor, but also one who is driven to tell the story with veracity. That was his whole mantra when we first met. I got an invitation to join the Black Storytelling League of Rochester, New York in the early 90s. And at that time, I had just started off doing storytelling. And I didn't even know when Doc had saw me, but he got the invitation, him and Rodney Young. They were the president.
I didn't even know Rodney Young was into storytelling.
Yes, sir. Yeah. When I joined in about 90, 91, he was like vice president and Doc was president. And got the invitation, went to a couple of meetings. And at that time, it was real in the beginning stages of storytelling. Back up a little bit. I had been on the open mic poetry, so I was used to sharing the written word and reading it. Sometimes I would try to, talk from the dome. I talk it from the dome, but I had to go back to that piece of paper, But once I got under and started working with Dr. Anderson and saw his long-term dedication, he was a man who had already, by the time I met him, had been doing reenactments and doing storytelling for 20, 25 years. And I saw in him, like I said, a dedication and an understanding of telling the story with veracity, getting the facts right, and making sure that we uplift the people with our stories. So after coming under him, I learned that even though the poetry and those things were good, there was nothing like learning a story and then getting in people's faces and just sharing a story that had a moral. And that was another thing that I learned from him was, if you're going to get in front of people, make sure you have something of substance to share and leave with them. And after, again, having been under the Black Storytelling League for a number of years, he also was the one who came up with the idea of AQUABA, the Heritage Associates. And AQUABA is still an organization that takes our stories from historical characters and brings those historical characters to life. And it was through AQUABA and the opportunities that afforded me after the Black Storytelling League that I came into contact with the story of Bishop Jermaine Wesley Logan, and have since just fallen in love with the story. Do y'all know who Logan was? Man, Logan's a bad jammer. Bishop Logan was born a slave in Tennessee, and he knew who his dad was, and was raised by his dad, a white man, with an enslaved mother. When he was about 20, 21 years of age, because he never knew what day he was born on, he escaped, moved up to Canada, stayed up there 2 or 3 years, came from Canada to Rochester, stayed here 2 or 3 years, and then moved over to Syracuse. Eventually, he rose from being just a lay preacher in the AME Zion Church to becoming a bishop in the AME Zion Church, someone born a slave. And he was called the king of the Underground Railroad. It is validated, it is completely true that he and his wife, Caroline, helped over 1,500 people who had made their way from slavery up to to Syracuse and either decided to stay in Syracuse, move around the area of Onondaga County in upstate New York, or he would help them get to Canada. So Logan and his wife, through their home, helped over 1,500 souls get their lives together after they escaped slavery. Called the King of the Underground Railroad. When I came in contact with his story and his history, I just simply fell in love with him, with the man. This man was so audacious, so bold. He was an escaped slave who refused to pay for his freedom. His ex-master, his so-called master, sent him a letter in about 1851, 1852. Say, hey, Jarm. In slavery, his name was Jarm. Say, hey, Jarm, I hear you a preacher up there in Syracuse now. I tell you what, you send me $1,500, and we'll call it even, because when you left, you took my horse, and that caused me a lot of financial gain. In fact, I had to sell one of your brothers just to make up the difference, right? He took a couple of days, and he said, I tell you what. He wrote her back. He said, listen, you hellish woman. How dare you say that it caused you an inconvenience, and you say in that same letter that you sold my brother, my kinsman, because it caused you an inconvenience? He said, I utterly disrespect everything that you're doing and saying. I was never enslaved. I was never your property. And how dare you say I owe you anything? Yeah, if you ever get Logun, Logan, U-E-N, Bishop Jermaine Wesley Logan, the king of the Underground Railroad, Syracuse, New York, a bad mamma jamma. After him, I just fell in love, and that was a man that I decided I just got to bring to life. And I've been doing him now since the mid-90s up through the present. Again, just fell in love with it. From the poetry and then the storytelling, then the historical reenactments, it's kind of sort of, once my memory started going, what's your name again? Once my memory started going and I started having challenges, I said, well, I've always wanted to put words in other people's mouths. So that's how I got into theater. So I started writing plays, and that's where we are right now in my development.
But that griot piece is still very present. This ability to tell this story and history without having a book in front of your face. You always had this propensity to do that. And I remember there was one time we were having a conversation and you were talking about how you were reading these articles about the history of the police in general, about how, like, in the 1800s they were getting beat up, right? Mm-hmm. And your just ability to recall stories and history. And in that same conversation, actually, I kid you not, that's when I found out that you didn't grow up here, and that you grew up in rural Wayne County.
Wayne County, yes,
right? So when you came over in 70, you said 72, right? When you came over in 72 to a straight up city, it's medium size, right? But it's a city nonetheless. How did that change your outlook? And then how did it change your outlook with art?
With art, at that time, I considered myself a poet, and I knew that I had a propensity and a love for words. It didn't change that so much. What moving from a rural community that was a community to an urban environment that wasn't a community. That's what changed for me.
What wasn't a community in the urban environment? What reeked of disunity or non-community when you came here?
The way we treated each other. The disrespect, the dishonesty, the interactions that we did, and I'm talking about, when I say we, I'm talking about the African American community. I grew up in Wayne County where everyone in that community, in that African American community, whether it was Sodas, whether it was Williamson, whether it was Marion, whether it was Ontario, we knew each other. We knew who we could trust, but even if we couldn't trust them, they were still part of the community, and they still abided by certain values. Even if they weren't trustworthy, they still knew what was expected of them.
Still aligned.
But But in this environment where you can do your dirt on the west side and go to the east side and look like, everything that's good, that was the wake-up call for me. That was so shocking to me that it took years for me to get used to. I'll give you a good example. So you come over, you good looking young man, got the fro going on, got the bell bottom pants, right? So you go out and, you go to a nightclub and you say, hey.
Was that a self-description of you in the day?
Sounds
I
like
got pictures, man.
so.
I got pictures. Right. But you go out to the club, and you, hey, how you doing? Good, I'm good. What's your name? Such and such. Okay, can I call you? Sure. And you call, and it's a pizza joint. Well, again, in the country, if you say, how you doing? Good. Can I talk to you? Sure. Boom. But over here, it became a thing of why play games? And the games seemed to be the norm. It just was mind-boggling to me.
And what do you think that derives from, that base mindset of playing games instead of being real?
So many folk coming from so many different directions, and like I said, you could, if you're on Jefferson and you do what you do on Jefferson, you can go back over to St. Paul and nobody knew what you did on Jefferson. It's just the ability to hide. It's the ability to move from one area of the urban environment to another area and become something else or someone else. Whereas in Wayne County, it was so small and we all went to the same churches. Even if we didn't go to the same churches, we knew the families. We knew the folk who they were related to. And I think, honestly, that there was more integrity. That out there, you were expected, there were expectations, clear expectations, and those expectations were filtered down. Whereas again, you get here, even if your parents had expectations of you, once you got outside the house, there was a whole nother world, there was a whole nother environment, perhaps that your parents didn't even know about. That you, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old were involved in, that your parents didn't know about. That didn't happen in my experience out in Wayne County.
I want to ask you a little bit about some of your affiliations, Djed. You're a member of the Bronx Collective.
I am.
Which is a group of black playwrights?
Black producers.
Producers.
Yeah, all playwrights, but the main reason the Bronx Collective came together was so that we could encourage and support theatrical productions of African Americans in Rochester. So we're all producers.
I appreciate the clarity on that. You're a member of the Black Storytellers League?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Okay, so former member of the Black Storytellers League. And you're a member of the Ma'afa Celebration Committee. And that's, of course, concerned with honoring the lives lost and the legacy established by the survivors of the transatlantic slave trade.
Yes, sir. Which you are also.
I'm a member as well, indeed. So each of these organizations celebrates, educates about our history, black folks' history, and seeks to stimulate a sense of community. Talk to me a little bit about how those initiatives are being received in this Rochester area, what your experience has been with your involvement in these initiatives.
The Ma'afa Celebration Committee, I think, has been embraced. We've had good turnouts. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary this year. A little bit of the history. The idea about the Ma'afa was brought to us by a European couple, Robert and Kathy Cobbett. Yep, and they started celebrating it. They brought it back from Charleston, South Carolina, the idea of it. But they knew, and again, this is to me the integrity that people come with and that they share with you. They knew that the Ma'afa should be celebrated and convened by people of color. So when they got back, they just didn't say, we're going to do this. They came to the African American community and said, this is an idea. Who among you want to be with us?
Where did they get the idea from? I could never picture a few white folks celebrating the Ma'afa with just white folks. Where do you think they got that
Charleston,
from?
South Carolina.
Wow.
Yeah, they went down and they found out about the celebration about the Ma'afa in Charleston. And
it wasn't just white folks.
No, it was
Yeah.
African. No. Bob and Kathy Cobbett are of European descent, but they went down and visited Charleston.
I see.
And they were in the African American community in Charleston was celebrating it. They found out about it and brought the idea and the celebration back to us, to the Rochester community.
I just pictured like a bunch of white folks celebrating the not acknowledging or recognizing the Ma'afa, and then they brought it up. Like, that sounds a little weird, but okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So they just brought it back to us.
Okay.
And when they got back, they just didn't say, we're going to do this, but they went to the African American community and said, this is an idea. We want to share it with you. You know, is it something that we should be doing? And Kathy spoke about this at this year's Day of Remembrance. She said, because I had said, you know, tell us about the process. And she said she knew that she had to get the approval from the African American community to do this. And once a group of us did coalesce around her, they did it, I think they just called it the Day of Remembrance when they started it. And then a number of years after they had done it, again, they said, you know what, we shouldn't even be in the leadership of this, the African American community should be. And that's when we, meaning Aaron, myself, and a group, some others, said, okay, we'll facilitate it, but we're going to change the name to the Ma'afa Celebration Committee, as well as we're going to change the date. You know, y'all been celebrating it the second Saturday in June. We want to celebrate it the day that they dropped the monument in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And we changed the date to
the 9th of June.
It wasn't not the 9th. Oh man, see, don't get old, man. I'm telling you, no, because now we've been doing it what, 2 years?
No, this is the first year that we changed it. So was it the 2nd of June then?
The 2nd. No. It'll come to
See,
me.
that's what happened when you put me on the spot.
Yeah, it'll come back to me. But we celebrated it after we became the Ma'afa Celebration Committee. We started celebrating it on a different day. That's the bottom line.
Can I just ask a question? You said a monument in the middle of the Atlantic.
Yeah,
Can you tell people? I know. Everybody else who don't know, just tell them I don't.
Right.
Know. I don't know myself.
And I'm
So put me on,
and I'm blocking on the date. But a brother in the U.S. House of Representatives came up with the idea of getting a monument and dropping it. I believe it wasn't halfway, but it was out in the Atlantic Ocean. They left New York City, they went out into the Atlantic Ocean, and the day will come back to me, out into the Atlantic Ocean, and they dropped the monument in honor of those African souls lost in the Middle Passage.
Is this the one where they're all kind of like in a circle? And like they're holding hands?
Not that monument. We used that image one year on the front, but this is just a single monument that they dropped. Right, that's crazy. But again, because we celebrated it for a number of years before this year. This is the first year that we celebrated it. July 3rd. We celebrated the Ma'afa from the year we took it over from the Cobbetts to up to this year on July 3rd, because that's the day that the brother went out into the Atlantic Ocean and dropped the monument in honor of those souls lost in the Middle Passage.
So, just for the record, would you say those folks that Cobbetts?
Mm-hmm. Bob and Kathy Cobbett.
That's the definition of responsible whiteness. Right?
I would call them
folk that wouldn't do that, even though that's the logical and right thing, because there's that privilege of not having to. But they did that, and they allowed black folk to not allowed, but like created that space. Right. For y'all to, take control over something that is our heritage.
You see, historically, we read about abolitionists, right. And we know there were black and brown and white abolitionists. But what I don't think we really get in our minds is most abolitionists truly believed in the self-determination of the Africans to do what they thought was the right thing to do. Ask John Brown. His name goes down in history as a person who tried to start a revolution and all this other stuff. But John Brown understood that when he went down to Harper's Ferry, that it wasn't his fight. He wasn't truly the leader. He was really trying to be an instigator. he took Shields with him. Shields Green, another person that I've done historical reenactments of. And he knew that he had not only to surround himself with people of color, but to get their permission, you know? And that is responsible whiteness. That is truly what an abolitionist is, who's of, you know, European descent. One who knows that the struggle and the direction that the struggle goes in is got to be and has to come out of the African American community. And once that they can support that, then they truly become abolitionists. Otherwise, they're just, you know, taking over for the other masters.
I see. So we're just gonna pivot to maybe talk about something a little bit more light, which is the play y'all got coming out, right? Open mic at Roasted Night.
Roasted Right.
Right, sweet. Roasted Right. My fault. Brother Atlas.
Really the same though. We talking about the same thing. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right.
No, I'm serious, and I'm very serious.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same thing.
Same thing.
Because it's about liberation. It's about information, and it's truly about us telling our story. Again, Dr. Anderson, tell our story with veracity. You know, and this is just another expression of it, a theatrical expression, but it's the same thing. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written it, and I wouldn't even do it.
What was it like having to tell this story with veracity, with Atlas as the music director for production, and with you as the playwright? What was that whole process like?
Heaven.
Nice.
I should.
True
you
that.
know, our community is made up of many different facets. And the one thing that you want to do is connect with someone who is understanding of their craft, as well as wants, again, to tell that story with veracity. And that's what I found with the brother. I've known him now at least 10, 15 years. You know, our paths have crossed and we've done some things together. But this is the first time that we've worked together professionally, you know? And he's exceeded my expectations.
Nice.
Exceeded my expectations because, again,
Don't surprise me.
But again, the whole thing is the way this play, and I'll just segue right into the play. The way the play is set up, all of you have done open mics. Everybody in the room has done open mics, right? So when I was conceiving of this play, I wanted to get the feel, I wanted to get the emotions, I wanted to get the overall environment of an open mic to those in the audience. I wanted to call it immersion. I wanted them to feel like this is loose. This is fun. This is something that I don't know what the person's going to say next. Even though it's scripted, I've shared with my actors, you know, I don't want you to act like you're acting. I just want you to be yourself. My two lead actors is Doug Curry, Blacks and Blues.
Yep.
Doug Curry. Who is just falling into the character of Ralph Morgan, a black Republican, a conservative black Republican, right? Who owns Roasted Right. He owns the building that it's in. The other lead is Emmett Mitchie, who I've known since I started doing open mics back in the 80s. Emmett was the first person who asked me to be a headliner at an open mic. Yeah.
Brother Djed, first of all, I feel like I need to say it's an honor working with you, brother. So we got about 2 minutes left in this. Tell the folks what the wrinkle is in open mic at Roasted Right that sets this apart from maybe a typical production.
So you got the play set December 5th, 1987. Okay, fictitious coffee shop, Roasted Right is the name of the coffee shop. The wrinkle is it's December 5th, 1987, 3 days after James Baldwin passed, made transition. And we have the Performer of the Year contest. 6 different vocalists will be vying for the 1987 Performer of the Year. The wrinkle is they're really vying for the 1987 Performer of the Year in the play. Every evening, it's going to be Thursday, August 2nd, Friday, August 3rd, and Saturday, August 4th. Every evening, it'll be 3 different judges, right? And each singer of all those 6 singers have 2 different songs that I wrote that they'll be able, and I wrote all of these songs in the 80s, and they'll be able to choose which one of those songs they'll lead off with, and if they get to the second round, which song they'll sing second. So the wrinkle is they're really competing against each other, differently every night.
So there's likely to be a different outcome every night.
And that's what we want. We want each night to be different from the night before.
That is so African. For real, just because this whole idea of improv
yeah.
and interaction with the watcher and the actual people in the play. Wow. So can you tell people when it's happening without telling them to go? Because our station has rules.
It's happening August 2nd, August 3rd, and August 4th. Can I say where?
Yes.
Yeah, it's at 1872 Cafe, 431 West Main Street, right down in the area next to Soul Green and all that area, where the McDonald's used to be on West Main Street.
Yes. True Rochester reference right there. The McDonald's with the green roof. Yes. Yeah. Mr. Snead, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on here.
Thank you.
For those who just turned in, you listening to BoomBappED. Check us out at 104.3 Wayo FM every Tuesday from 1:30 to 2.
There it is.
Catch us online as well. Signing out. Peace.
Peace.
Sure.